before us. So I'm going to invite Josh and Marcia to come up here with me. Some of you may remember Marcia, and some of you met Josh out in the prayer garden. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcia. I'm going to let her introduce herself. I'm just going to pray really quickly for us and our time together. Father, you are good and you are faithful, and we invite you into our space of conversation today. You created us as holistic beings made in your image. And mental wellness, mental health is important to you, as is our sexuality, as is our intellect, as are our emotions. Father, I ask that by your Spirit you would connect with us in a profound way as we discuss a topic that is of great relevance to all of us and to our families and our loved ones. So Holy Spirit, please guide us and lead us and direct us as we converse together in your presence. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen.
Marcia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see people here tonight and lots of familiar faces. My name is Marcia Cameron, and I'm a student right now at Providence University in their Masters of Counseling Psychology. I just feel like it's just such a great privilege to be here with you, and I am doing my counseling internship at Alberta Bible College, which I'm very excited and humbled to be doing. One of the things that I have a lot of passion about is just supporting people through their journey, and mental health is a really hard topic sometimes for people to talk about. I know with COVID, anxiety, depression, and just really thinking about like, what is this all about, and how do we communicate with others when we can't be around others has been really, really tough. Mm-hmm. You know, tonight has been so wonderful because I see so many bright faces. Like, I can just tell you guys are just feeling like, oh, it's so amazing to be around people. And for some people, there's going to be anxiety about, whoa, I'm around people again. Like, this is feeling really like I want to be, but I'm struggling with being around people again. And, you know, do I wear a mask? Don't I wear a mask? Or even some of the guilt, I think, around, you know, when we've been maybe not our best selves over the last year because we have been suffering from anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And the shocking numbers are, even before COVID, 1 out of 3 Canadians throughout their lifetime will suffer from some form of mental health. And that's a really staggering number. And, you know, so often we don't feel comfortable being able to talk about it. Mm-hmm. You know, but the thing is we're in it together, and all of us are here to support you. Josh is also a counseling intern, and we're really excited to be here just to talk about this, and feel very grateful that you're all here to have this conversation. Many things have happened for people. Unfortunately, domestic abuse has skyrocketed over the last year, alcohol and drug addiction, and a lot of struggles within family dynamics has occurred. I mean, all of a sudden, people are stuck in very small spaces, and that's not always easy to communicate. And then again, there can be a lot of guilt around that, because as Christians, you know, we're taught to be peaceful and cast our cares to God, but at the same time, God has created us to be emotional human beings and wants us to support each other. Brothers and sisters together, and that's really, you know, for myself, that's where my passion is just to really support people through their journey in a really non-judgmental, safe environment, because we all go through our things. It looks different, but nobody's unscathed, and we all go through times of difficulties. Josh, I'll pass it on to you.
Oh, okay, cool, awesome. Hello there, my name is Joshua Jensen. I am I'm a counseling intern at Innovative Counseling Solutions, which has a partnership with Alberta Bible College. I am a student at Briarcrest Seminary doing the Master of Counseling program, so that's how I ended up, doing a counseling internship. I'm also terribly awkward, so I'm sorry about this. Thank you for welcoming me to this panel, Alberta Bible College. I didn't know anything about Alberta Bible College till a couple months ago, and you guys are. I think I saw on the thing. It's you guys are celebrating 90 years. Wow, congratulations. Here, just random applause real quickly. 90 years, that's amazing. Amazing history. My little buzz, little thing that I'm going to talk about is just the fact that mental health is important, in taking care of things. But a big aspect of mental health is just taking care of yourself and maintaining self-care, right? So one of the things I really want to talk about that's super important in college, it's super important in all of your life, but especially in college, is like you've got to rest, okay, right? Like, yes, I see some nodding heads, thank you, yes, we got to rest, right? Rest is such an important aspect. It's so easy when you're in college to just get like frazzled with schoolwork, with time, and especially like in the Christian world, in Christian culture, it's really sad, but we have such a poor culture of rest.
True.
We just want to give ourselves and throw ourselves in, but we need rest, and it's so important to have to be rested and to have time to rest. It helps you mentally, it helps you physically, it gives you more energy, it gives you just a better outlook and stuff like that. So rest, and for Pete's sake, guys, we have a theology of rest. Our God rested after he created the universe. Like, we can rest. If God rested, we can do it, right? Another just terribly important thing that, in college, and so maybe this is something that won't sound all that, not surprising. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyways, my brain, I have ADD, so I just go all over the place. You guys also need times of play, right? So thank you. Don't play too much. Please do your studies, okay, guys? But don't get bogged down in your studies. Make sure that you're having fun. Make sure that you're doing things. It's so mentally healthy. I had stats, but I didn't write them down, and I was supposed to write them in my hand, but, it's what they're all, but, taking care, it gives you energy, gives you life, laugh. Thank you for the laughter. I appreciate it. Another thing, guys, is have you guys ever heard of the psychological benefits of meditation? Mm-hmm. Yeah, meditation. So you can just look it up. You Google it. Meditation is really good practice of mindfulness and reflection. But in the Christian world, what is meditation in the Christian world? Prayer, yes, prayer, and reading the Bible, and you look at benefits, you have more energy, better outlook. You physically are more likely to be healthy when you are meditating, and we have prayer and reading our scriptures. That's Christian meditation, and and we know that it's good because we have science that says doing these kind of practices are good. But for goodness sake, how much better is it that we actually commune with the living God, right? Yeah. Last thing is with mental health. It's like totally okay to need people. It's totally okay to get to a point where you say, I need help. I need help. I mean, Jesus, right? He had James, John, and Peter. And he's like, guys, I am undone to the point of death. I need you. Come pray with me. And they failed. Find people who won't fail, who won't fall asleep praying with you. But that's part of why we're here too. And guys, if the incarnate God of the universe has got to the point where he's like, please guys, be with me. I need you. It's okay for you guys to say that. It's totally okay.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't know, that's my tidbit. I'll pitch it back. I don't know.
Good job. Thank you. All right, Marcia, I'm going to pass it back to you because you had some stuff that you want to share. Now, I'm hoping that everybody is listening while they're thinking of questions to ask about mental health, things that are valuable to you that you want to know, and we will do
our best as mental health practitioners to help navigate some of those questions and find some answers.
Yeah, so I think it's also important to realize that mental health looks different for everybody. Sometimes it could just be a change in mood, or, anxiety and depression both show up very differently. Sometimes it's not being able to sleep. And then even going back to what Josh is saying, then it's almost like that catch-22. You're not sleeping, then it's creating more anxiety, then you don't have a clear head. And you might not even realize that that's a form of depression or anxiety for you. Another piece is feeling irritable or really overwhelmed. As students, quite often, we know there's those stressor weeks where you might have several papers due and an exam, and then maybe you have other obligations. You've got work to do, or kids, or a partner that you're trying to help through something as well, and it just feels so very overwhelming. And so it could show up during those periods of time. Sometimes you just feel like you can't get out of bed that day, and you're wondering, well, what is going on? Like, this isn't my norm. And so it can really show up differently, and it's just realizing that, hey, something's going on with me. And as Josh said, like, it's okay to reach out to someone and just say, hey, can I talk this through with you? Like, I'm not quite feeling like my norm. And sometimes it's small things that can create big things, or sometimes it's big things, but once you talk it through, it just really helps you be able to figure out where you're at or how you're feeling. And again, I know over the last year, there's been a lot of time to just think about, who am I? What am I about? Like, why do I feel like this? Probably more time than what we're used to, because there hasn't been as many distractions. And I think that's also been really hard for people. And so just being able to talk it through with someone and being gentle with yourself. And it is scary. Sometimes it's scary to be able to come and talk with someone. But it can make the world a difference, and just trying to figure out where your mind's at and where your heart's at and the help that you need.
Yeah, great point. Just to clarify, so anxiety generally involves the future. What if this happens? We get anxious about things that have not yet happened. Depression is generally fixated or focused on the past. So that's how you can tell if you're feeling really focused on the future in ways that are negative. I think it's good to have future plans, but anxiety can be defined as future focused in a negative way, right? Depression, on the other hand, is looking backwards and not being able to resolve what has happened. And I know that we were going to talk a little bit about trauma, which is, I think, a common denominator for so many of us, that we've had a traumatic experience, or we are still in a traumatic relationship that has caused deep wounds. So we'll touch base on that, but I just wanted to clarify, all of us have anxiety, and all of us have moments of depression. Doesn't mean that you are clinically depressed, doesn't mean that you have an anxiety disorder. There are very distinct criteria that you need to meet diagnostically in order to be diagnosed officially with anxiety, an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder. So we're not going to talk about that. We'll leave that to your clinical sessions with Josh and Marcia. But please be aware that your mood has an impact, not just on you, but others. And therefore, God wants to deal with your mood. God wants to deal with your attitude. God wants to deal with your emotions, with your psyche. And that's part of psychotherapy. That's part of the journey. And I'm not going to get you to raise your hands, but all of us up here, we've all been in therapy. So judge us if you want. Therapy is a healthy relationship with self. It helps you navigate in a really healthy way the parts of you that feel broken, or that feel anxious, or that feel wounded. Okay, so I want to normalize that all of us have had to deal with our own stuff. And so because of that, we want to help others deal with their stuff too. Josh, do you have anything to say?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know if anybody goes into counseling who hasn't had a real, like, tangible benefit from it. And so, yeah, just the fact that we have these backgrounds is part of the reason why we're here. We've seen the benefit of it, we've appreciated the benefit of it, and we want to pass that on to other people, and we want to share this benefit and be practitioners in a way to communicate this benefit to other people. So, yeah, there we
Well,
go.
I feel like since one member of the Trinity is called the counselor, I kind of feel like it's an important part of, who God is. And so counseling is an opportunity for us to share our hearts with God in relationship with someone else. And it ideally is a safe relationship that is normalized, especially as Marcia mentioned. COVID has unveiled or unearthed maybe more of our anxieties or more of our pressures, and it's hard to hide when you have nowhere to hide. So part of my excitement about our working relationship with Josh and with Marcia is that you will have safe people to communicate with, right? To share your hearts with, and it will be in a safe place of non-judgment and hope-giving. That's the bonus of having the Holy Spirit live in us, is that we have the wonderful counselor inside of all of us. And for our counseling students in the PACE track, moving forward, right, you will be required to work your stuff out. It's mandated, and especially if you move on to Providence or to Briarcrest or to Yorkville University, it's mandated, right? So practice now. Get in a counseling session with one of our interns and learn about yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing just sometimes figuring out why we react the way we do, or why we see the world the way we do, and just that self-discovery and giving yourself that gift to really take the time to think about it. Sometimes it's stuff that goes all the way back until, when you were 4 or 5 years old and you never realized, wow, I've been carrying this fear and this hurt around. And just by figuring that out, you can change how you want to show up in the future. And it's like exciting to see when people have been able to come to that piece. It's very healing.
Totally.
And if I can say something real quickly, not fully related to Marcia, but guys, it's free for you being here. Like Shannon's talking about go check it out at the very least, right? There's literally nothing to lose other than an hour of your time, and that's really little for the profound benefits. An hour of your time for once a week. It's profoundly beneficial, and because Alberta Bible College has made it a priority because they understand the importance of mental health, you guys just have this great benefit in this period of time in your lives. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, true. Very true. So I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions, and then I think we're going to talk a little bit about trauma. But is there anybody that has a burning question at this juncture? Okay, Ivy, and then I'll go to Nate.
I'm just wondering, how it will work exactly.
Okay.
Will you have an office? Do we make an appointment? Do we just go in? Or?
Great question. So Ivy's question is, how does this counseling thing work with Josh and Marcia? And so I want to emphasize the confidentiality. So Corey will get it's not a report, he'll get a document, for lack of a better word, that will say that client 1 or client Z or whatever, however the counselor's code, just so that we can keep stats on how many students and staff are accessing the service. So you will get contact information, either cell numbers or email from Josh and from Marcia, and you can book directly with them. So you will bypass, having to talk to me. I mean, you can if you want, but I'm just going to refer you to Josh or to Marcia.
But
And
they
then-
need to know which one's better.
Right? And so then, Ivy, what we would want you to do is book directly with the counselor. I'm going to suggest, give it a couple of sessions before you make a hardcore decision that you don't want to counsel. Okay? It takes some time to build what's called a therapeutic alliance. It doesn't generally happen immediately. Okay? You have barriers up. The counselor's trying to help you tear down the barriers, and it takes a little bit of time, like any other relationship. So once you've made that initial contact, we will have a counseling space here on campus, but we also have where Josh and I are doing our internship at Innovative Counseling Solutions, which is a really quick jaunt across Deerfoot on 32nd, so super easy access. We have office space there, so you can either meet with Marcia here on campus, or you can meet with Josh at ICS.
And I also do Zoom
Right.
as well.
Yeah, and so does
So do
Marcia.
I,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you can either do a video conferencing session, or you can meet here on campus in a designated confidential space, or you can meet off campus in a designated confidential space. Does that answer your question, Ivy? Okay. Nate?
Yeah, just a quick question. You don't need to know what we want to talk about, do we? Because sometimes I don't know where to start. For example, I don't even know how to refer myself to counseling.
So did everybody hear that? Nate's just asking if to make a counseling appointment, you actually have to have an issue, or in lingo, in the counseling room, it's called symptoms, right? Presenting symptoms. No, the answer is no. You don't have to know what's wrong with you, or if there's anything wrong with you, because there's nothing wrong with you, right? There's nothing wrong with you. You're simply coming to talk about whatever it is you need to talk about, and you'll figure out that process with one of your counselors, okay? Does that help?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Lana?
Will faith be an aspect of the counseling session?
Great question. Will faith be an aspect of the counseling session? I'm going to toss that over to the interns. I'll start with you, Marcia.
Sure. I believe it's on whoever decides to come and see me. My program is a certified Christian counselor as well, so I do have that along with the regular psychology degree. So I think that's really where we could come together at the beginning and decide what's important.
Josh?
I completely agree. It's really on you when you come in, how much you want it to be Christian-y, how much you don't want it to be Christian-y, and it's totally okay. I can just think of two different clients that I've had in the past who are both Christians. One is they want it. They want to talk about God, and they want me to, and they feel really that it helps with that therapeutic alliance, knowing that I'm really involved with God. Mm-hmm. The other one, it's mentioned, and that's it, and it's not something that I need to produce or go on, because that's not what that client needs or wants. So it's whatever you're bringing into it. We are faith-based, so you know where we stand, and so we can integrate that as much or as little as you want.
So spirituality is one of many cultural dimensions of who you are as a human being, whether it's Christian or whether it's agnostic or whatever. That spirituality is a key part of who you are as a person. So however you want to integrate it into your counseling sessions, your therapists, it's their job to align with how you want your sessions to be managed, right? So if faith is a high value for you, again, you have Christian therapists who may do Christian counseling, or they may do counseling from a Christian perspective, because that's their worldview. Does that answer your question, Lana? Okay, great. Arlene, and then I'll tag Sarah.
Is this just for the length of a case class, or are you here until Christmas?
Great question. How long do we have our interns with us?
My understanding is for the full school year, if possible, so two full semesters.
Yeah. September to April?
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So, Sarah?
Okay, my question is, family involved? Can we bring our families?
Okay, question is, can family members also get counseling with the student?
For myself, absolutely. Definitely family. I know we've had a few questions about children, and I'm totally comfortable with it. Josh?
Yeah, actually, so at Briarcrest, we primarily work from a systemic perspective. So I would actually encourage, if you have a family, I would encourage that involvement because you're a system, you're a unit, and what's affecting one person is affecting all of you. And it's going to work out better if you're all involved. But if you want to come by yourself, that's also perfectly appropriate.
Please make that clear when you book with
Yeah.
Josh or with Marcia that, you know, hey, I'm bringing my spouse, my partner with me, or I'd really like my teenage daughter to sit in with me, or my adult son, whatever. Okay. Any other questions? Marcus?
Yeah, mine is a kind of vote of confidence in the therapeutic counseling process, because I had the privilege of, being introduced to it by Shannon. Last year it was so horrible. I was passing through tons of, anxiety concerning sexuality, concerning my job and my academics. It was so heavy on me, and I was like, I'll be able to, brush it aside and, just move ahead. But when I met her, she told me about this therapeutic counseling, and I opted for it. It was an amazing outcome that, the
That's great.
experiences that I had. I was able to navigate myself through all of those pressures, and I see myself as a better person today. Not going through all of that mental stress and
Good.
agony. Like, I'm an international student. My wife is not here with me,
Yeah.
and I have my kids here with me, and they are young people with tons of weird activities that I could not cope with. So but to be able to go through all of this, I want to pass a vote of confidence for those who feel that they could navigate their way or do that stuff all by themselves, while you have this great opportunity to come out of it without much cost associated with it. So I'm grateful to you, Shannon.
You did all the hard work, Marcus. You had to say yes and go to counseling, right? So again, thank you for that vote of confidence and for that billboard advertisement for counseling. If Marcus can do it, y'all can do it, right? It's important because we aren't created to not participate in community, right? So think of counseling as an additional community that you get to be a part of, right? Any other questions at this point? Okay. So, can I ask a personal question? How many feel like they've incurred or endured trauma? If you're comfortable showing your hands, I'm going to put mine up. Yeah. Yeah. Most of us. And I'm going to say that that is typical, right? That the minority would be you didn't endure trauma. That would be a minority. But the majority of people in a community setting have endured trauma. So what do we do with trauma? What happens when we experience a trauma event or we navigate traumatic relationships.
Reactions to it.
Yeah,
This anger,
yeah,
separating for yourself.
absolutely. Yeah. So there can be behavioral outcomes. I'm going to give you one example of a high probability if you've experienced trauma. You will battle addictions. That is a high probability. The data shows that trauma opens us up to addictions. So, Marcia, in your experience as a practitioner, what can you share about trauma and addictions?
I'd actually like to, is it okay? I would like to share actually a client that I had.
Sure.
I had a client last practicum actually who, it was such an interesting journey with her. I was the very first counselor she ever had. And it was just an amazing journey because I could tell she was very scared to come and talk to me. And we started off with, well, I'm just feeling some anxiety, future stuff in regards to COVID. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. And as we got deeper, she did some self-reflection and started talking about, well, I'm really like just drinking way too much. Like, I don't think I've ever drank this much before. And I said, okay, well, let's explore that. Well, I've always drank, and I do have alcoholism in my family background. And I said, okay, so how does it make you feel? Like, where is this at for you? And through our journey together, over a few months, she came to the self-realization that she had trauma in her childhood because she grew up with alcoholic parents. One was incredibly abusive, and she had never said it out loud. Like, she had never been able to really visualize it, verbalize it, and think through it. And then she realized, and I just thought this was such a beautiful unfolding in a way, that she didn't want to continue that cycle. She's got children. And she just realized, holy, like, this is bigger than what I ever thought.
Wow.
And it was a really powerful moment because if she hadn't had the courage to go to counseling and realize it, she wouldn't have been able to identify, first of all, that was just, the alcohol part of it was just a way to band-aid what was happening, and she wouldn't have been able to realize the trauma that she had actually occurred to her, and then be able to really speak about it and start the healing process. And so it's amazing because she was able to bury it for 30 years.
Right.
So it just got buried.
Yep.
And she didn't know why she was feeling the way she was. And I think that's the power of counseling. Sometimes we don't know why we're going. And that's the beauty of it. It's okay. Maybe you don't need to feel like you have a problem, because you really don't. You're just working through whatever is you're feeling inside.
Right.
So that was just such a powerful story. So I just had to share that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, again, when we know someone that's going through it, right, it becomes a very tangible, personal journey for an individual. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Josh, thoughts on trauma and addictions?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's more likely. I guess I'll also share something that's maybe tangentially related, or I'll just take it on my own. But had a client that had addictions issues, and it was just kind of confusing. Couldn't figure out like where they were at with some stuff. They had a lot of anger towards toward one family member, but they had made amends. But then as we dug in, I realized that they were mad at this other family member. And so this other family member, so this one family member really committed evil against them, but this other family member witnessed it and did nothing about it. And the one family member that really committed evil, they were able to make amends, but the other family member had died. And that's when the issue started. Like, that's when they started having addiction trouble. And it was like, because they had this anger, and there was no sense that it could ever be settled, right?
Wow.
And just this trauma that had just fully flooded out after this person who passed away and never been processed, right? And just was processed through partaking and through indulging, right? In things that are using as a Band-Aid from the real issue. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. And again, I mean, these are very specific traumas, right? And it can be something as basic's not the right word. It could be if you were a child of divorce, like that causes trauma, right? There's attachment disruption, and that traumatic event, right? It's like, well, 50% or whatever of families get divorced, right? So it's like it's just normal, but that's a trauma that we endure, right? Some of us have very specific traumas.
And if I could pitch off of that, so we all know about PTSD, right? Really, the more that we're looking into, the more we're looking into how our brain works and stuff like that, we're realizing that pretty much any trauma can induce PTSD. Now, the more intense the trauma is, the more intense the PTSD will manifest.
Right.
But any trauma, like losing a beloved pet, can induce PTSD. And that's a real trauma. Like, it might sound stupid to someone. It doesn't sound stupid to me, because that's a real thing, that
Right.
a real trauma that you've gone through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even, some of us as children were bullied in school, right? That induces trauma, and especially if it was, violent. Again, trauma looks very different for different individuals, and I never want to minimize someone else's trauma, as Josh was saying, right? Your trauma is your trauma, and you may not even know that you've endured something that has profoundly impacted you as a child. But that's part of the job of the professional practitioner, is to work with you through that. And sometimes it can take years. Sometimes it can take a week. So, as Marcy was saying with her client example, right? It's like you don't even know why you're feeling the way you're feeling. But when you feel safe enough to disclose what's happened, right? We then can process with you through the trauma. So, any questions about addictions or attachment or trauma? I'm not asking anybody to confess anything. I'm just simply saying, addictions is a huge thing. Sorry, like Christians have addictions. Like, sorry, it's a reality. So pornography is a huge addiction, and it's not a male-specific, right, issue. It's not gender-based. Pornography is an addiction that is prevalent in the church. Video games is absolutely, yep. Gaming is another huge addiction. So we have some acceptable addictions as Christians, right? Overeating, that's an acceptable one. Gaming or overgaming, so that's acceptable. Social media. Anybody else have any acceptable addictions? I think alcohol use, and I'm not anti-alcohol. I think that Christians can overindulge in alcohol, and right, it's somewhat acceptable. Probably not cocaine. That's probably not an acceptable one in the church. But shopping is, yes, excellent. Yep. Shopping is for sure. For sure. I have a really good friend who would tell you in a heartbeat that she is a shopaholic, and that is a huge addiction.
There's a difference of shopping, right?
Sorry?
The difference kind of, it can be clothes,
Right?
shoes.
That is not an addiction. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus.
I think I have friends who they're addicted to watching sports, clearly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an acceptable one, right? It's not one that you're usually like, well, what's wrong? you're watching a lot of basketball. Like,
No, you're right.
Yeah.
It's anything that is used to escape your reality can become an addiction for sure.
Can we consider silence? Like,
An addiction? Oh, that's Corey's dream addiction. Corey's like, if everyone would just be quiet forever, it would be amazing. What do you mean? Sarah, I'll come to you right away.
falling in love so much with silence these days.
Yeah.
People get worried about it.
Yeah, well, if you don't respond when someone, speaks to you, I would say that that's not healthy. You should probably respond to people. Like if you're just silent and never speak, that's probably not healthy. But I can see that you've been in Corey's spiritual formation class and solitaire, what is it? Solitude and silence and solitude. I know, right? Yes, you'll get an A+ from Corey. Sarah?
I guess my question is, I guess some guidelines on how to identify when, the line between a healthy or reasonable coping mechanism, like a little bit of escape, and an addiction.
Great question. What is the defining line between, right, coping mechanisms that are healthy, whether it's just a bit of escapism versus full-on addiction? I'm going to throw it over to the panelists.
I would say with an addiction, really, is it creating chaos with people who matter to you? Are you able to stop? Like, would you be able to stop tomorrow and not continue that behavior? I think with a healthy, sometimes just need a break is going to the movies and just needing to free your mind, but maybe you can take someone with you and it's not creating chaos in your life. I think addiction is something where you don't feel good about it actually, but you just keep doing it because there's something you're getting from it.
yeah, if you have this defensiveness, if you can't imagine like life without this thing, it's like it's a compulsion. Really, is what's happening, right? That's when you know, oh, like I need to take a step back because this is problematic. Yeah.
And I think, the diagnostic statistical manual, DSM-5, has very specific criteria for substance use disorder, binge eating disorder, anorexia, like specific addictions. Gaming is actually also one that a lot of research has gone into. I don't know if anyone else has heard, but in this past week, China has established a new law that children under the age of 17 are allowed to game 1 hour 3 times a week, and it's designated times and designated days, because they have seen the outcomes of the addiction of gaming. So they're sort of the first nation that I'm aware of that has actually made it illegal to allow your kids to game more than 3 hours a week on designated days for designated hours. So I think, Sarah, my position on addictions is if it is ruining relationships, if you can't stop it, it controls you, those are really good signs that you are addicted. So, and again, food addiction is an area that I'm quite passionate about. Several of my own clients have binge eating disorder or bulimia, so they're eating a ton but they vomit. Binge and purge, that's bulimia. Binge eating disorder is when you just consume a huge amount of calories in a really short amount of time, but you don't vomit it out. You may exercise excessively or you may not, but binge eating disorder has become one of the most prominent or prolific eating disorders. Eating disorders, it is an addiction, but they are the most deadly of mental health disorders. 11% of all bulimics, granted they're like 1% of the mental health population, but 11% of them will die. So eating disorders kill. So addictions are not just destructive to the physical being. So if you're, doing meth consistently, right, like there's damage, but it will destroy relationships too. Right? So, any other questions about any mental health stuff? No? All right. So Marcy, I'm going to ask you a question about your own experience with clients in marital conflict.
So I've seen quite a few clients come in, and actually I've had a few different types. One have been coming in because of just couldn't get along, arguments, just seeing things from a different perspective. And it's been really powerful because quite often their goal is the same. It's just they've stopped being able to communicate.
Right.
And understand each other. So it's really interesting to be able to help them come together to see that at the end of the day, their goal is the same. And often they come in and they truly love each other. That's why they're both there, because they want to fix it, but they just almost need like a mediator to help them be able to hear each other again and realize that, hey, we're actually both saying the same thing, but for some reason when we're hearing it from each other, it's different. And so I think it can be very powerful for couples to come in. I've also had couples who I've worked with actually where they call it maintenance. It's just their marriage maintenance. So it's not that they've got any massive big issues, but this is how they keep connected and really being able to keep those lines of communication open and challenge each other in a really healthy, happy way. And so I've seen people where they come in every 2 months, and that's what it's about. It's just this maintenance of, everything else is work. We want to do the same thing for our number one relationship.
Great. Yeah,
And that's been very positive, I think, in both scenarios where they can work through it.
Yeah, excellent. Josh, what's the primary reason that people come to see you in the counseling room?
Yeah, so far, it's just been, it relates back to trauma, typically. Sorry, we got to go back to the backwards, but I've mostly seen individuals, so there's trauma, there are issues related to that trauma that they've seen, so they don't necessarily understand the root of the trauma, the trauma as its roots, but they see these issues and they want to resolve these issues that are destructive in their lives or that aren't meeting their expectations for their lives. And so they come in and they're like, hey, I've got these things, I'm not entirely sure why I have these things, and we're like, okay, let's go, let's dig deep, and we dig deep, and it gets real, and it's beautiful.
Yep. So I'm going to ask you both this question. I'll start with you, Marcia. How do you deal with the awkward conversations in counseling? Is there anything that's too awkward to bring to the counseling room?
No, I don't think there is at all, actually. Personally, I don't find anything awkward to talk about. It's what someone's going through. It's what they're feeling. I just feel very fortunate that they trust me to share what's going on with them. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I think there is no limit when it comes to really speaking your heart and your truth and what's happening or what's happened.
Right.
And so there's no awkwardness. I think with a therapeutic alliance, for myself and for most counselors, we go at the pace of who's seeing us, and that's the most important thing, being client-centered. So it's about what you need. And so it's not, we have no objective to it except for getting you guys to where you need to be and where you need to dig.
Right. Josh, is there something that's too awkward for a client to bring into your counseling room?
No, not at all. Sorry, I'm just processing here. Yeah, just recently, actually, I had a client who was talking to me. They're female, and just something very pivotal and momentous was happening in their life, in puberty, and they were just talking about all those feelings and things of female puberty and first periods, and it was really, I was like, wow, I was like, I'm just amazed that you're talking to me about it. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I was just like, thank you for trusting me. So it's like nothing gets too awkward, and I was just I felt very blessed, and it was just like they just went right there. I was like, oh wow, okay, like thank you, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that gives our students
Sorry.
permission to talk about awkward stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, if there's nothing off limits, then building that trust and then being able to share, right, the things that you need to share. Let me just talk a little bit about confidentiality. Josh, what are some limits of confidentiality?
Limits of confidentiality are imminent harm to yourself or to another person, and child abuse, whether historical or in the future. That's just one of those limits that we have to say. If there's child abuse at all, it has to be reported. If we truly believe that you are going to hurt yourself or hurt another person, we have to go tell, legally obligated.
Yeah.
But other than that, am I forgetting something right now? I haven't, yeah.
No.
No, okay, good. I did everything perfect, sweet.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's like.
Yeah, exactly. So if you show up to talk to Marcia about killing your spouse, like she has to report you, and she has to warn your mate. Yeah, and if you confess that you've either harmed a child, so under the age of like 17 or younger, or that you plan on doing that, those are limits. Other than that, as Josh said, right? We're here for your awkward. We're here for your rejoicing. We're here so that you can, share your hearts at the level that you're comfortable. And then I think the ultimate outcome from a counseling perspective is healing and wholeness. Do you want to comment on that, Marcia?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to, again, just wanting to help people get to a place that they just, they feel whole, they feel that they're able to work through whatever it is that's bogging them down and can start the healing process. Because again, we just through all of our conversations tonight, sometimes we don't know what that feeling is. And so if we can help someone just identify it and work through it and then just feel like they can breathe again even, it's just, that's just awesome. And I think that's what we're all about, yeah.
Josh, do you have any further comments on healing and wholeness?
I like that idea of wholeness. When we're not mentally healthy, right? That's part of us that's broken. That's not whole. It's not shalom, right? And so we want you to be in that shalom space of just being healthy and being the healthy creatures that God has made you to be.
So as we wrap up, I'm just going to open it one more time for questions. If anybody has questions or comments about mental health and wellness, we'll take those now. No? Everybody's good?
I have a question.
Sure.
Why did you guys, like very specifically, why did you guys go into counseling?
Marcia?
For myself, it was really just a calling. I started down this path in my 20s. I was doing a lot of psychology and social work, and I did 2 years with victim services, actually, both in their crisis hotline as well as the mobile. And what was really interesting is what dawned on me is, to be honest with you folks, I hadn't lived enough life lessons. And that's the truth of it. Like, I was not ready to go wholeheartedly in. Then I ended up doing several years in business, and then I went through something a few years ago, and God just came to me and said, it's time. I am calling you. This is the work you're meant to do. You've gone through those life lessons. You're just kinder, open, and you realize that life is gray. And so that's how I ended up getting into this, and I feel so grateful and closer to God for it.
I think for me, I remember sitting at the dinner table with my dysfunctional family and me mediating and fixing everybody, right? And my dad saying, you know what, little Miss Counselor, like, you need to stop this. And I was thinking, you know what, like, I was wired for this. I was wired to help people navigate life. I think at times I'm more of a coach than a counselor. I'm like, go, run, come on, fix this, let's go. Rather than, you know what, you need to try and figure this out, and do you think? And like, so I have to be really mindful about that, because I'm like, come on, let's do this. Yeah, I can't remember a time when I wasn't counseling. So, how about you, Josh?
Yeah, similar to that. So there's two things. One was I hated high school. So how I spent high school, and I don't know why I got away with this, but somehow I did. And I graduated too. I don't get it. But particularly my last year of high school, it had to have been at least 50% of the school time. I was in the hallways and I was just talking with like my peers, and I was just like, man, these guys have got a lot of stuff. And so that was number one, and I was just like, there's got to be a pathway to help them. There's got to be something out there, right? And so that just felt really good. Number two was the church that I came to faith in. I just saw divorce after divorce after divorce, and they'd go and they'd talk to the pastor, and it was real great, and they were trying something, but the pastor, amazing guy, preached well, but just wasn't equipped for this kind of thing. And I was just like, that's so sad. We've got to have people out there who can help and who can save marriages. I love pastors, but we got to alleviate some of the pressure on them, Yeah. So those were the biggest things for me. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, Corey, I think this brings our panel to an end. If nobody else has questions or comments for Marcia or Josh, I'll let you close us down or wrap us up, however you want to do that.
Well, thanks, gang. This was great. This workshop was really helpful. I think I'd invite you to think about one thing that you'll remember from this workshop. Sometimes it's really easy to walk away and go talk about the flames or the news or your next course, and it flies by. So before I dismiss you, I'd like you to reflect. What's that one thing that caught your attention tonight? For me, it was this definition that Shannon gave about the difference between depression, something unresolved from my past, and anxiety, something that I'm thinking about my future. I'd never heard that before, and that was super helpful in helping me process. Miracles happen.
My work here is done.
Help me process my own emotions, because I actually feel both of those things, and I've never been able to kind of distinguish them. So I'm imagining you had an aha moment at some point, so I'd like you to just take a moment to think about that. And then secondly, take the risk of sharing that with someone here tonight. We're going to have a break till 7:30. Talk about the flames. They're great. But we can talk about the flames a lot and not talk about deep stuff. And so take a risk. Talk to someone during the break about that aha moment. Before I dismiss you for that reflection and sharing time, the main reason I wanted Marcia and Josh and Shannon to lead this workshop is not only to share their brilliance, but that you get to know them a little bit. So that as this academic year progresses, and you need to talk to someone, you have an idea about who that might be. So you might know, you might not know, Shannon's our chaplain for the ABC community, here always to talk and pray and cry through life with you. Okay? Yeah, mostly cry. So access Shannon. She's on staff here. She's around all the time and is here to journey with you. And so I want you to get to know her and her passion for mental health. I also want you to get to know Marcia, who's going to spend the next 8 months immersed in the ABC community, on campus, video conferencing sessions, here to support you in your mental health journey. I want you to get to know Josh, who's another resource not far from here, who might be someone that you just connected with tonight and would love to explore mental health with. So that's my main outcome tonight, is that now you know 3 people who are going to be here for you this year. So thank you, Josh. Thank you, Shannon and Marcia.
Thank you.
I'm going to invite Tanya. I think I just saw Tanya come in. So Tanya, why don't you come up? Please welcome Tanya Wu. Some of you met Tanya last evening, part of our online PACE orientation. Tanya is a volunteer here at ABC, and she helps us in a very unique way to help through this process we call our grievance process. You know, the ABC has a grievance policy.
I've used it several times with Corey.
And Tanya has been there for me. Tanya's role is really to help you navigate what can seem like a pretty intimidating process. I have a conflict with a classmate. I have a conflict with an instructor. That could be a pretty intimidating situation to navigate. I think a policy of ABC is completely unjust, completely unfair. Where do I go? We have a grievance policy for students, for staff members to access. And most importantly, I think, is we have someone to support you through navigating that grievance process. So during orientation week, I want to make sure that you meet Tanya. So Tanya, I'm just going to hand it over to you to kind of say more than what I said and introduce yourself. So thank you, Tanya.
Hi everyone. So I love to help people. So if you do find yourself in a situation and you're not exactly sure what you should do, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure somewhere in your materials there's the email address. Can you remind me what it is? Advocacy@abccampus.ca. So, so just email that and I will get back to you right away and we can talk about what those next steps would be. You can talk to me about the situation and I can help you through that process. It might be that there is a different policy that covers it and so I can guide you there. If this is the right policy, then I can help you through each step of the way. One thing that is really important is that I think this is a very empowering process. So you will be owning it the whole time, and I'm just there to support you. So once you do mediation with that individual, I can be by your side, sitting there, just helping support that way. But it's your voice that will be in that whole situation. So I will mention one thing because there will be a 6-week period where I am not the grievance advocate. So I have the opportunity to be Shannon's TA, which I'm so super excited about because I love teaching too. So I love helping, I love teaching or TAing or whatever it's going to be. And so one of the really important things with the grievance advocate role is for that individual that supports you to be neutral and independent from the college. So when I am being the TA, I'm going to be having that other relationship with the college. And so I need to take a step back for those 6 weeks. And then I can go back to my position as grievance advocate. So one of the things I think will be great is I'll get another new perspective when I am being a TA. And so then when I am grievance advocate again, I can just bring that knowledge and experience with me. So yeah, I would encourage if you're wondering, just reach out and we can work through it together.
Tanya, can you just tell a little bit about your history with ABC?
No.
It's complicated.
So I was actually a PACE student quite a few years ago. Super loved the program. And so I graduated, oh my goodness, 2 years ago, I think, 3 years ago. I find with the pandemic, time is very strange. So yeah, so I graduated, probably like 3 years ago. Oh my goodness, wow. And yeah, I just fell in love with, learning because it's awesome, but also counseling. And so I'm actually doing my master's right now in counseling psychology. So I'm doing that on the side as well. But yeah, so I kind of bring that to the college too. So I can definitely just empathize, help you through. And I'm really good with like policy and process. And so it's like those two things just come together and kind of make me great for the grievance advocate.
True. So true. Thanks, Tanya.
Always so grateful, Tanya, that you come to our events to meet our students year after year. I hope you're getting the point here. We want to support you as students the best we can to help you succeed during your time here at ABC and beyond, whether that's through mental health support or navigating conflicts in relationships. So please, if maybe over the break you want to connect with Tanya or Josh, or Marcia or Shannon, you'll have an opportunity to do that. So I promised a moment of reflection, didn't I, before we wrapped up. So whether you're here in the chapel, we're also live streaming this event for those who can't be here in person. Just want to give you that moment. What's the thing that God is saying? Pay attention to that. Give you that moment. I'm going to wrap up in prayer. So God, we are so grateful that you meet us where we are at. There's nothing wrong with us, I heard tonight. And man, that's good news to me, and I think to everyone in this room, because so often I think we hear this message from ourselves, from the enemy that says we are wrong, we are bad, we are broken. And we forget that we are created in your image, we are made good. And God, we have so much potential in our relationship with you and with relationship with others. So grateful for people like Shannon and Marcia and Josh, and Tanya, who are there for people like me and the rest of the people in this workshop who just need support. Thank you. And God, for that one thing that you've drawn to our attention, that's captivated our imagination tonight, I pray that you, by the Holy Spirit, would plant that seed. Show us what to do with it, that you would make it grow, that this year could be a new chapter in our lives. Perhaps burdens that we've been carrying for a long time, or relationships that have been broken for far too long, for broken ways of seeing ourselves that we've allowed to define us. God, could this be the year where those things are no longer true? God, we pray that you would bring great fruit in the ABC community this year. Help us to be willing to go to places that are difficult in our lives as we seek to be effective witnesses and servants for Christ. Thank you for Alberta Bible College. Thank you that we can meet in person. I think it's good to be together. And so as we head into the break, hope you had a good break. Some of you took a tour of our campus. Some of you continued those conversations with classmates you haven't seen face-to-face in months. So I hope you had a nice break. We're going to shift now into our second and final workshop for the evening. Thanks again to Shannon and Josh and Marcia for facilitating that conversation on mental health and college life. Certainly, right from orientation week, we want to elevate that mental health conversation, so critical to our overall health as students and as teachers and staff. Our second workshop is more related to COVID. Of course, we have to have this conversation, right? I know it's probably one that you have had around dinner tables and on the phone and with news media sites many times over recent months. But hey, we've been closed as a campus to students for a year and a half. So it would be sort of, I think, a bit of an oversight if we didn't at least have this conversation as we resume our in-person life together. So that's kind of my task over the next few minutes, is to have this conversation. I confess that I am not a medical professional You probably knew that already, right? We have a dentist in the room. He's a medical professional. I am not an expert on COVID by any stretch. But I am a member of ABC's COVID committee. That's my claim to fame. There's only one other person in the world who can claim to be a member of that committee. So it's a very exclusive club. David Ford and I have been this COVID committee for the last year or so. And so what that has meant, does this sound okay, Joelle? Am I doing anything wrong with? Yeah, we're good. Okay. What this has meant is I spent a lot of time thinking through COVID restrictions, through policy, through procedure. It has been this whole extra layer of my life, as I am sure it has been for you in many ways over the last year and a half. So I get to speak a little bit to how we move forward now. And I think perhaps we could all sort of give a collective sigh, not necessarily of relief, I think. I think about where we hoped we would be with COVID entering into the fall is much different than actually where we're turning out to be. Do you have that sense? Do you remember like late June and we were all like, oh man, by the fall, this is going to be sort of a footnote to our lives. And yet here we are in September, and there are still lots and lots of COVID conversations happening. It's the headline to most news stories. You're going to hear that running first on the nightly news. Still, COVID numbers are going in the wrong direction despite our best efforts to help it do otherwise. So maybe we can just kind of grieve that together a little bit and acknowledge like, we're still needing to have this conversation. But the reality is, at least we can do this together. And I'm so grateful that we get to do that, because I've been, in many ways, working in my basement for a year and a half. And it's so good to get out of the basement and to get on campus again and to have you here and to have this conversation where it's not so hypothetical anymore. How do we do life together in COVID now? When I advertised this workshop back in June, things were very optimistic. I said, let's talk about how we move forward in a COVID world post-crisis. I'm not sure we're post-crisis yet. Do you feel like we're not still quite there? That title, that second half of the workshop title needs to evolve a little bit. I think, we're still not there yet, but the first half of the workshop title I presented in June, if you read that letter, if you didn't, it's okay. The working title was Wise, Engaged, and Friendly. How could we do life together as an ABC community and still get along in a world where COVID exists? Okay, so we're gonna keep these three words: wise, engaged, and friendly. This is how I want to frame our conversation. How can we be wise about this? How can we be engaged? How can we be loving or friendly to one another when we're all a little stressed? Have you noticed that? You're a little on edge. At least maybe I'm just projecting my stuff onto you. I've certainly felt more frazzled over the last year and a half than normal. So we're going to have this conversation. How do we move forward in a COVID world? Being wise, friendly, and engaged. I think our campus has been closed to students since March 2020. It seemed longer than a year and a half in many ways. It seemed like forever since we've been having in-person classes and events like this in our chapel. It's been a difficult time for all of us, for us as faculty and staff, and I know it's been difficult for you as students. So I just want to say thank you for bearing with us over the last number of months as we've been exclusively online. I think I can probably read the room and say that's been challenging. Zoom's been helpful to keep our studies going. We haven't had to hit pause, but it's been challenging to be exclusively online. So thank you for sticking with us. I know it hasn't been super easy, and it wasn't a popular decision for everyone to do that way. But I think without the presence of vaccines, for most of 2020 and the first half of this year, we felt it was the best way to protect our students and our staff and faculty is to be online. But here we are now in the fall, and we feel like now with the presence of vaccines, we can take that step forward. And even though there's risk, even though COVID is still around, vaccines have changed the game. And so here we are in person, even with COVID cases sort of increasing. So that's some of the rationale of why all of a sudden we're willing to be in person. Vaccines. So let me, as the garbage dumpster is being emptied outside of our door. Let me talk a little bit about vaccination. I'm going to ask some questions along the way. Would love your feedback. So let's start here. Does ABC require you as students? Does ABC require me as a staff member to be vaccinated? What do you think? What's the answer there? I'm seeing some head shakes. No, we don't require you or I to be vaccinated. We know this is a very contentious issue. Have you noticed that? Have you seen that on social media at all? I've put out some fairly, what I consider mild things on Facebook once in a while, and it's interesting. People I haven't heard from in years respond very, very quickly. Very quickly. Like, oh, sorry, I guess I touched on a nerve there. This is a contentious issue with vaccines. So what's ABC's perspective? I think if you've been reading our stuff online, and our role as an educational institution is to give you good information about vaccines. So it's not to tell you that you have to get it, it's to tell you that the kind of work that vaccines do. And so that's been our approach, is to give good information and to encourage you to be vaccinated. That's our approach this fall. So certainly that continues. We're going to continue sort of banging that drum. Ultimately, your vaccination status is private medical information. Are you aware of that? I can't walk up to you and say, hey, Alicia, have you been vaccinated? Sarah, have you been vaccinated? You can have that conversation. You might be open to sharing that. You can also say, what's your business? Okay? So I want you to be aware of that. And maybe that's on your horizon already, but that's private medical information. So it's difficult to mandate vaccines, isn't it? Even if we wanted to. How do we know where you're at? We're asking for private information at that point. So that's kind of the weird ground we're treading. We want to encourage you to get vaccinated, but ultimately that's your choice. We want to give you good information. If you are not vaccinated, if you're in the room or you're listening online and you're not vaccinated, we would just encourage you to consider again that choice. And also, we're riding through another wave, it turns out. So if you're not vaccinated, you might want to participate in classes virtually. That certainly is something you might want to consider, or our community events participating virtually as we paddle through this latest wave. And so want to note here that for at least this academic year, we are offering every course in a hybrid format. What does that mean? We're offering every course in a hybrid format. Can anybody sort of explain that, what they think that means? Yeah, Lana.
It means that you're going to be offering both Zoom and in person at the same time.
Yes. If outside the city you have a choice, everyone has a choice. Okay, what we would ask of you is that you let us know what you think your choice is. So don't leave us guessing. We would love to know, do you plan on being here in person, or you're going to be Zooming? Now, of course, that will vary week to week, class to class. We get that, but what's your primary intention? It would be really helpful if you let us know that, and particularly let David Ford, our academic dean, know that, because as he plans classes and classrooms, how many people are going to be on site helps know what course to put in which room. And as you can imagine, as an instructor, not knowing who is going to be in person and who's going to be on Zoom, if you don't learn that until 6 o'clock on a PACE Tuesday or 8 a.m. on a college course Friday, that's just going to make things a little bit harder to get started in an efficient way. So if you haven't let us know already what you're primarily choosing, please do let us know. And know that we're not judging you either way. Okay, if you say, I want to Zoom in this semester, I'm just not ready to come in person, that's a perfectly legitimate choice. And we're going to honor that. Okay, and you can Zoom in, no problem. We know that from time to time you won't be able to give us a lot lot of advance notice. I woke up this morning and I don't feel well. That's okay, we get it. That's going to be a lot of notice. But send us an email and we will know to include you in the Zoom link, okay? Any questions about your choices about virtually or in-person participation? Is there anything that's unclear that we can clarify for you in terms of our expectations of you in that piece of our life together?
Like me, I walk.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have the opportunity to be in person when I'm off work, because I'm 4 days on, 4 days off, and if my 4 days off falls into my class sessions, I would prefer to be on campus. But if I'm on 4 days on, I want to be on Zoom.
Yeah.
So is it possible for me to have both options?
Yeah, so let me just restate your question for the people online in person, and sometimes it's more convenient to attend virtually. Is that flexible? And the answer is yes, of course. Again, communication with your instructor, very, very key. Here are the days this week that I'll be in person and the days that I will be on Zoom. Okay? Yeah. What I'd kind of discourage is sort of making a decision every morning. I just feel really tired today. I'd rather not get up an hour earlier. I just feel like rolling out of bed and staying in my pajamas for class. You can do that. You're not going to be deducted any marks for that. It's just not a great way to plan your life. Okay, so try to be really intentional about this, right? I'm getting up today and I'm going, or I'm going to be like, you know what I'm saying? Okay, it's going to be really tempting for those 8 a.m. classes in the college program to just think, I'm Zooming today. It's a Zoom day. We all will have Zoom days, I'm sure, but let's try to make intentional choices. Does that make sense? Let's talk. Are there any other questions first about in-person virtual dynamics? We are all navigating new territory this semester, so expect that there's going to be some bumps along the way as we enter this new chapter. Let's talk about masks. Is anybody confused about that in your daily life? Like as you go to the grocery store, as you go to the coffee shop, as you go to church perhaps, come here to ABC, you're hanging out with friends, like, I don't know what to do. Are you in that place? The gray zone sometimes is confusing. Either what are the rules or what are the unwritten rules? Sometimes can be even more difficult to discern. Let me clarify where we are at right now. So masks currently are optional on campus. You may wear one. You may choose not to wear one. That is your choice currently, based on the fact that Calgary repealed its masking bylaw back in July. You're probably all dialed into that. So right now, we're in line with that bylaw. We're saying it is your choice. It is not required. But if you're watching the news, you might have heard this week that Edmonton just has reinstated their masking bylaw. Starts on Friday. There are leaders in municipal government in Calgary that are meeting on Friday to see if Calgary is going to follow suit. So I want to say where we are at currently, because we know this is evolving, right? So classes start in the college program Tuesday, and PACE program the following Tuesday on the 14th. Things could change between today and then. So just be aware of that. Speaking very present tense, masks are currently optional. We'll keep you posted. Keep an eye on the news. See if that changes. Because if that changes, obviously ABC is going to fall in line. We will require masks if the bylaw suggests that we do that. My gut tells me that Calgary's probably going to follow Edmonton's lead. I could be wrong. But just be aware, that's very much in flux. So in the meantime, we're living in this gray zone. Some of us are choosing to wear masks, and some of us are choosing not to wear masks. So I want to open this up a little bit for conversation, for your feedback. In the absence of a bylaw or provincial mandate that everyone must wear a mask, how are we going to navigate this as the ABC community? Can we have that conversation? I'd love to hear some thoughts from you. How should we navigate this? How are you thinking about how to navigate this, assuming that it's optional? Do you have any suggestions about how we might do that well? I'd really love to hear some ideas. How do we navigate the gray zone in a Christian community? Marissa. Okay, so the suggestion here is openly ask someone if you're engaging them. Yes? Oh. Let me ask from your personal experience, what has usually been the response? No, don't worry about it. Has anybody been asked, the response has been, yes, please do wear a mask? Has anyone got that response? Okay, at least one person. Okay, so some people are willing to put themselves a little bit more out there. Canadians, we're known to be very polite, aren't we? We're not going to rock the boat. We don't want to impose our views on other people. I had this experience. I bought a couch and a love seat. The delivery team came into our house and they asked, hey, sir, would you prefer we wear a mask? My inside voice said, yes, please. My outside voice? Nah, don't worry about it. Come on in, right? My politeness kind of took over a little bit. I wasn't quite honest with myself, and I wasn't quite willing to impose my desires on these friendly delivery people. So, I mean, that's on me, right? Yeah, I wasn't up front. But one thing that I'm thinking, if we ask, often the response is going to be politeness. So what would be another way that we could sort of navigate that moment if we're engaging someone? I mean, how would you know that if someone would like to wear, like you wear a mask? How do you even know to ask that question? They're probably wearing a mask, right? So, what do you do then? What's another approach? I don't know, Eric or others? Here's a thought. On this illustrious and exclusive COVID committee that I'm on, we've talked a lot this year about our guiding values. Okay? So one of our guiding values has been respect for authority. So as an ABC team, we've said, whatever the government direction is, we're going to follow it. Even if it doesn't make us happy, even if we disagree with it, we're going to fall in line with the federal, provincial, municipal guidelines. We're just going to do that. That's a value of ours. Okay? So that's guided us. But another key value that we've highlighted is love for other people, respect for other people. And so I'm wondering if I could suggest this. I'd encourage you, even if masks are optional on campus, I'd encourage you to bring one. In fact, Eric, can I invite you to do something for me? There's a stack of ABC masks over here. I'm not sure if we have about 20. That's about how many people we have in the room. Can you grab them? Would you mind handing them out? Here. Here's one practice that I've gotten into, just keeping it in my pocket. Every once in a while, we'll have someone come onto campus, and they're wearing a mask. To me, that is an indication to me, I don't need to ask the question, do you want me to wear a mask? That's just my cue to say, my mask for that interaction. That's the way that I'm trying to approach it. So I don't want you to feel like you have to wear a mask just because one person in a room is wearing a mask. But I'd like you to keep a mask on you so that you can have the option to navigate that situation in a loving way. Okay, so you may choose that in that situation you don't wear a mask, but it gives you the flexibility to have options in that moment. Okay? So let me tell you, a few weeks ago, everyone in my family got sick. We have 5 kids. You met some of them tonight. Somehow I didn't get sick. Like, it was like the grace of God. Somehow everyone in my family was sick. I didn't have anything. And so I kept coming to work, but I wore a mask. And people were looking at me funny on campus. I was the only one. Again, I was thinking, how do I process this situation through my showing love for others? I'm like, hey, all my kids tested negative for COVID. We went through that process. But still, you know, who knows what I'm carrying? I'm feeling fine, but this is a way I could just show concern for my coworkers. I'm going to wear this because people in my household are sick. So those are some ideas. Those are not mandates from on high that you have to navigate situations like I've imagined. But I want you to consider carrying masks so that you have options in those sort of moments, right, on campus. Any other ideas? Any other comments? Questions? Yeah.
I just want to mention, I think that's a great idea. Even before COVID, there are other cultures that would do that, you know, automatically. If they felt like they were a little bit sick, they would just come with a mask.
Right.
So I think it seems like a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just repeat that. So someone in the room shared that, you know, we've seen other cultures wearing masks for a long time. It's fairly new to Western culture. Canadian culture at least, but we've kind of adopted that over recent months, and many of us have felt very relieved not to have to wear these all the time, right? But what are some of the benefits of still sort of thinking about appropriate times to do it? Maybe not all the time, potentially, but maybe there's times. Linda, did I see your hand up?
I just want to say, there are some people who have experienced significant trauma who, for whom, if their mouths have been covered when they've been attacked, it's hard for them to wear a mask. So I just want people to be aware of the fact that if someone isn't wearing a mask, sometimes.
So someone in the room said that you know, some people have, again, trauma in their past where wearing a mask is, you know, could be a triggering experience. So they have potentially really good reasons for not wearing their mask. So for me to make a judgment about that person on their choice to exercise their freedom to not wear a mask, I don't know the story that is leading them to make that choice. And so again, out of respect and love for the other, I'm also giving that person the freedom to make the choice that fits them. Okay, there's way more about that person than I may ever imagine and know. Let's talk just about physical distance at ABC. Still, where possible, where feasible, you know, spread out a little bit. If you have a chance in your classroom, spread out a little bit. We've tended to learn to avoid people, though, haven't we, a little bit during the pandemic, where you're always taking a step backwards. You're always wondering, you know, should I be close to someone else? I don't think that's healthy for us long term. Would you probably agree with that? That we need to, at some point, find a way to engage people in person in a healthy way, and many of you are doing that tonight, and that's great to see. So as we find healthy ways to engage in person, we still need to remember that we're all probably having different boundaries in our lives. So, story from this summer, we took our kids to a local amusement park, and a lot of people were not aware that people had boundaries. So, you know, you line up for these attractions, and there's people like right on your bumper, right? Like they are just like breathing down your neck, not considering that perhaps you wanted a little bit of space. So we've seen that approach this summer. First day of school was today, dropping off our kids at school. one of my kids' teachers out on the field waiting for her class to come. She has a can of spray paint, sprays a circle around her. Please don't come in my bubble. And she was very clear about that. Respect my bubble. So I've witnessed like these very two extremes, people who have no bubble and people who spray paint their bubble clearly for you to know exactly where their bubble exists. That's just a really good reminder to me that people are in different places. You know, people are in different spaces. So as we navigate this thing together, let's just be aware that my space and boundaries may not be the same as the people around me. So when you say you're sitting down to class, you might want to just be aware, is someone want me to sit right beside them? If there's an option to be one seat away, like maybe that's a conversation to have. Where are people's boundaries? Okay, they may not be exactly the same as mine. Anybody else have a story? Anybody else have, a time where they've encountered that in a social context that's surprised them, or anybody want to share their own bubble? Where are you at? Any feedback there? All right, we're good there. So physical distancing, not required, recommended. Let me touch on the hand washing thing. Again, we're all grown-ups. We've learned to do this really well over the last year and a half. We hope that the caretaking crew at ABC are going to have to keep refilling the hand soap over and over as they do their work on campus. So we hope you wash your hands well, regularly while on campus. Hope you've seen the hand sanitizer around. Please continue to use those good habits as we help keep you healthy. Here's a big one. Staying home when sick or when unwell. You're probably hearing a lot of that. How do you define unwell? How do you define sick? I think if you're like me, that's been a bit confusing, especially this summer. There's been sometimes some vague messaging about what that definition means. Sometimes we've thought that definition is going to change, or that plans have been announced to change and then they've been revoked and actually they're not changing and they're postponed. That's been kind of confusing. So what are we talking about when we say about staying home when sick or when unwell? Whoa. Anybody want to help out with that? What does this mean? Marissa?
I don't think I have enlightenment, but COVID has definitely shown me that I live my life with a permanent sore throat. And you only start to notice that when you're told that sore throat is a symptom. So
Right.
that's interesting.
Okay, has anyone been through that over the last 18 months? Like, wow, I think I'm sick every day.
I have like a permanent runny nose.
Things that would have never crossed your mind before. Now you're hyper aware of everything your body does. Yeah. And so you got to learn to discern, right? How to read your own body, for sure. Thanks for sharing. I know I've definitely experienced that at times this year. Let me, anybody else, how do you define sick? How do you define unwell? Ivy.
I think, well, if we're all in college, we're obviously smart to some degree. So if you feel a little off, then that would be a good, indicator.
Okay, just not feeling myself.
Yeah, if you're like, oh, I feel like I have a symptom of some sort of illness that's usually not there, especially if we've all been made more aware of how our bodies function, then we can be more aware of what's abnormal.
Okay, so if I can just summarize quickly, I know how I feel day to day, and something feels different today, and that just catches your attention. So I may not be feeling 100%. Okay. Are you familiar with the Alberta Health Daily Checklist? Is this a part of your life? I see some head nods. I see some head shakes. This is the tool we want you to use when coming to campus, the Alberta Health Daily Checklist. If you Google that, you're going to find that very easily. It's posted at the main door of our campus. I don't know if you saw that when you came in today. It's this tool that Alberta Health has created to say, hey, here's how you define when you're not feeling well. Here are the kind of things that are related typically or have been related, especially to COVID. Are you feeling any of these things? If so, you should stay home. So we're going to have a little bit of a quiz here. This will be fun. And I do this because the summer has been particularly confusing with different rules changing. So let's try to sort this out. I'm going to do it sort of ask some questions, and you give me some feedback. You and I, we have a runny nose. We have a runny nose. Okay, so we stay home. I feel better in 3 days. So I have a runny nose on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, I feel better. Can I come back to class on Thursday? What do you think? It's okay. It's okay. Just put yourself out there. Yes or no? Doesn't matter. We'll debrief. Can you come to class on Thursday if you had a runny nose on Monday? Sure. Okay. Some people, sure. Anybody have a different answer? Anybody on the no end of that spectrum?
I would wait until the next week.
You'd wait a week.
Yeah, so like if you had it on Monday and you're feeling better by Thursday, but it's waiting 2 more days.
Okay.
So I would err on the side of caution.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Some say they'd give it a bit more time than 3 days. They'd give it maybe a week or something like that. All right. Let me try to spell this out to the best of my understanding. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but I've spent some time sort of reading this stuff closely. So you and I are still legally required to isolate for 10 days if what? Any ideas? We test positive for COVID, then we're 10 days, we need to stay home, okay? That's the first one. What's the other reason we need to isolate for 10 days? Close contact with someone who's tested positive? Actually, and this is part of the confusing piece, that's changed this summer. As of the end of July, that is no longer legally required. Someone I live with can test positive for COVID. What's my obligation? Monitor for symptoms. And if I start to feel sick, then I need to isolate and go through the process. But no longer is it legally required if you're a close contact. Sometimes you won't even know if you're a close contact because they're not doing all the contact tracing anymore. But if you live with someone and they test positive, you'll probably know. But sometimes you won't know if you're a close contact. And earlier in this pandemic, you would, because you'd get a call from AHS. Okay, so if you test positive for COVID, you need to isolate for 10 days. There's another reason too.
If you travel out and you're just coming into the country?
Okay, so if you have an international travel, that depends. There's sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay, you have to go through the process when you arrive in Canada, and they'll say if you qualify for an exemption there, or if you need to quarantine. So I've heard people experience both lately, coming out of country. Some people have not had to quarantine, and some people have had to. So it depends. More vagueness, sorry about that. If you international travel, it can go either way. We are legally required to isolate for 10 days if we have one of the 6 core symptoms related to COVID. Anybody know what one of the 6 core symptoms related to COVID is? Cough. Not a core symptom. Fever. Runny nose. Difficulty breathing. Shortness of breath. Loss of taste or smell. And sore throat, I think. Was that 6? That sounded about right. If you or I have one of those 6 core symptoms, in Alberta, we need to legally isolate for 10 days. So if I have a runny nose on Monday, I can't come to class on Thursday because that's 3 days. I need to stay home for 10 days.
What if you tested negative?
Thank you. So here's the way around that. You get your COVID test and you test negative and you feel better, you're good to go. So I have a runny nose on Monday. It's one of the core symptoms of COVID, defined by Alberta Health. I go get a test, it comes back negative, and I'm feeling better by Thursday. I come to class. Now, if I test negative, but I still have the runny nose, I still have to stay home. I don't want to spread whatever I have to others. But if you have those two things, the negative test and symptoms resolved, you're gold. My family and I have walked that path many times over the last 18 months. We don't want to go through the process of testing. It's a pain, especially with kids. We don't want to stay home for 10 days. We have plans this weekend. So we get tested, we test negative, we're feeling better. We have more freedom again. Okay, but I think there's been a little bit of confusion this summer about what the isolation requirements are. I was confused on that this summer. I thought as long as I'm not testing positive, I'm good. That's still not the case. That could change, the government says, on September 27th. My guess is it won't change yet, but that's where we're going eventually, is we'll see some shifts there, but those, we haven't shifted yet. Testing positive or 6 core symptoms of COVID, we have that isolation requirement. Okay, is that helpful? I know it's a little like, how am I going to remember that? Alberta Health Daily Checklist will help you sort of figure that out. What if you have one of those non-core symptoms? Someone mentioned a headache. Like you have this laundry list of symptoms, right, related to COVID. Chills, painful swallowing, nasal congestion. If I feel unwell or I'm fatigued, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, unexplained loss of appetite, muscle and joint aches, headache, pink eye. What if I feel any of those things on Monday? Can I come to class on Thursday? What do you think? Non-core symptom. What do I do?
Well, technically you could come, but to keep others in consideration, you should stay home.
Okay. So technically, it still could be a case of COVID, for example. Some of these symptoms, all those symptoms have been related to that particular virus. So it's not, I mean, it's possible that you have it, even though these are secondary symptoms. Here's the recommendation. Stay home until your symptoms resolve. That's like the minimum requirement. So I have a stuffy nose. It's on that secondary list of symptoms. My minimum requirement is stay home till I feel better. Okay, so yes, I could come to class on Thursday if I feel better. Now, testing is still recommended, but that 10-day isolation is not required. Okay, so that Alberta Health Daily Checklist will help you figure what symptom do I have, what's the isolation requirement. The AHS online assessment tool will spell that out for you. Do you know what I mean by the online assessment tool? We've all learned that. Okay. I know this is kind of painful in some ways, like you've heard enough about these things, I'm sure, over 18 months, but even, I think we've discovered there's still uncertainty around this. This is the kind of stuff we have to get used to again, especially as we come to in-person classes again at ABC. The assumption is we're all using that checklist every day before we come so that we're making good choices and even knowing what our legal obligations are. Comments, questions? Lingering confusion? Be a polite Canadian person and just not say. Idea is, how do we handle that situation? You're in class on a Tuesday night, a Wednesday morning, person beside you is clearly unwell. How do you navigate? That's a bit awkward, right? Not trying to be an alarmist, but how do you respond to that situation? Yeah. Hey, have you heard of this thing? Do you fit any of that category? Yeah, you could do that. try to kind of an educational perspective, not you're coming down hard on them, and just saying, hey, are you aware of this?
Just ask them questions, like, how are you feeling? Like,
Yeah.
you know, do you think you should stay home, or what do you think?
I think we would have done that pre-pandemic time, like, hey, you don't look so well. Or maybe say it differently. I always hate when people say that to me. You look terrible. Thanks, I feel terrible.
Yeah, or ask them, like, do you need a rest, or...
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you're feeling well. Like, are you okay? What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, with the mindset to help, to be there for them, but not to outright tell them what to do, because that might give somebody a heads.
Sure. Again, what's our value? Love for the other person. I'm not primarily just thinking of me in that moment. It's like, how are you? I don't know. Sometimes you could be so involved in the stresses of life, you don't even really realize perhaps that you have you're coughing or something, right? So showing concern, asking a question. Good. Yeah, Marissa.
I was kind of following off the asking a question as well, but with the secondary of, it might be something else that's causing the symptom. Like if we're coming into winter here and it starts snowing, noses are going to run.
Yes.
Because it's cold outside. You're going to start having running noses as you hit campus. So
Mm-hmm.
there might be some other reasons for that. How do we navigate that?
Great questions. So someone in the room said, there might be other reasons why someone has that particular symptom that you're noticing. How do you do that? So again, sorry to tell all my family stories, but we're dropping off our kids at school today. Do you have any allergies? Well, I tell the teacher, my son always has a stuffy nose. Okay, so you're going to hear that as you're talking to him. He's going to seem like he's sick. He's been tested many times for COVID. We're working to figure out what allergies or other issues might be going on. There's something else going on. He's not sick. So I think the Alberta Health Checklist also says something to the effect that you have these symptoms that aren't related to already pre-existing health condition. So I might have seasonal allergies. That's my story. And so it could look like I'm sick. It's seasonal allergies. There could be really good reasons why someone is still present, even though they appear unwell. There could be really good reasons that I don't understand. And so that conversation might illuminate that. Let's go here and then in the back.
Yeah, most sites that I cover in my security work have this established protocol to get your temperature checked.
Right.
Get into the premises,
Yeah.
into the facility, and then put down your name and the temperature reading and, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just for a remedial check, all those that are accessing the facility,
Yeah.
So I don't know if such a procedure might be helpful for us, that every morning we come into campus, get temperature checked, and then be able to put down the details that, we're good. That would be a remedial measure.
Yeah, no, someone suggested in the room, many places you get your temperature checked before you access a business or a workplace. Have we experienced that? So we do have some thermometers on site. If you would like that to be part of your routine at ABC, come to the main office, we'll check your temperature. That's not something we're instituting, but it's an option to do. So even potentially, if you have a thermometer at home, check your temperature before you come here would even be an even better, perhaps, way to do that. But certainly we have thermometers here if, or perhaps throughout the day, am I getting feverish? We can help you figure that out. We have thermometers in the main office. Thanks for that comment. Okay, Arlene.
Am I allowed to ask the sick person beside me if they're sick? Am I allowed to say what's going on with you right now?
So the question is, can I ask someone if they're feeling unwell? Is that private information? Is that what you're thinking?
Well,
Yeah, well, someone else will take a shot at the question of, am I allowed to ask someone how they're feeling and ask and maybe say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be here. Can I do that? Yeah, go ahead.
As somebody with chronic asthma,
Yeah.
when I get sick, I will cough for like 10 weeks and
Okay.
sound really, really bad.
Yeah.
So I appreciate when somebody says like, hey, how are you feeling or whatever, because then I can say, you know, it's just a lingering bronchitis infection or whatever. I'm not contagious. And that way there's knowledge, and I don't mind saying it.
Right.
But I'd rather that than somebody wondering, am I going to make you sick?
Right. Yeah.
Right, so I would rather be asked than have you wondering.
Okay. Thank you for that. So someone in the room said, you know, they have a chronic health condition, and when someone asks them how they're feeling, it helps them be able to just be open and honest about, hey, I'm not contagious, this is my thing, and you don't have to worry. Anybody else want to give a different perspective there? Yeah, go ahead.
I do, you can tell I have a chronic pre-existing condition. And I think it all goes the way that somebody asks you.
Okay.
Because I've had people even before COVID, when I completely lose my voice, which I will, physically take a step back from me like I've got the plague or something.
Right.
And so I think it really depends on how you ask, but it's tricky because it gets to the point where now everyone's demanding to know your complete medical history. Right? It feels that way.
Yeah.
I actually took a letter from my doctor that says she doesn't have COVID, she has pre-existing medical condition.
Well, I'm sorry for that. I know it must be, it's just a hard time, isn't it? And if that's your story, then it'll be exhausting, I'm sure. So I want to acknowledge that. So the comment was, even the way someone asks you how you're feeling can make all the difference. You know, are we doing it like, hey, how are you feeling? Or is it a compassionate kind of inquiry, kind of was said earlier here? Yeah, I think, you know, we're a community. I think implicitly when we come to class, when we come on campus, I think we need to trust each other, not be super suspicious of everybody and assuming the worst of them. You're just trying to break the rules and can come.
I think we need to believe the best of each other, but if there is a time when we do have a concern for that person,
Our love for them, not our suspicion. And so how we ask that question, as was said, very important point. So thanks, that was really good point.
So am I allowed to ask if they're sick?
Yeah.
Don't ask them.
I think the general answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think implicitly we all agree with this.
We're just in a weird time, and so we might have to ask awkward questions from time to time, and I think we just need to give each other the grace to do that, in my perspective. Okay, let's work on wrapping up. We have about 5 minutes left. I do want to just highlight the policy side. We've talked about, you know, Alberta Health a lot, but over the past year, ABC has developed and adopted a range of COVID policies as we were kind of preparing to reopen, and then that wasn't possible. We had to have all our ducks in a row. So we had a ton of COVID policies that we wrote, and now as we are sort of transitioning into a new phase of the pandemic, what is happening is that we are sort of moving, we're in the final stages of retiring all of our COVID policies. Now, give me a sec, don't think we're just throwing caution to the wind. Because the pandemic is, you know, restrictions are changing, and the situation is a little bit different, we are looking at retiring COVID-specific policies, and we are adopting broader policies around communicable diseases, like COVID, like the cold, like influenza. So instead of having like 8 different COVID policies for different activities that happen on campus, we are going to have just 2 policies that's going to cover COVID and a range of other respiratory illnesses. All right, so we're just in the final processes of crossing our T's and dotting our I's on those policies. When that's done, we're going to communicate those policies to you so you know what our practices are, what our expectations are. But we're going to have a prevention policy. How do we kind of prevent the spread of COVID or the flu or the common cold while on campus? And it's going to be things like hand washing, sanitizing, physical distancing, staying home when you're sick, all the things we've been talking about. And we're also going to have a communicable disease rapid response plan, and that sounds all pretty formal. But what it means is, first policy is how do we prevent ourselves and others from getting sick? The second policy is what happens when we start getting sick? What do we do? So let me run a scenario by you. You're in class. You felt fine when you came, but hey, let's say you have a 3-hour block on a Thursday morning, or you're in PACE class for 4 hours. You start to feel yourself coming down with something in the middle of class. That happens, right? What do you do? And that's what our rapid response plan wants to kind of help you think through. What do? You start to feel unwell, or you're at chapel. Who knows? What do you do? Any ideas? I'll walk you through kind of our formal steps, but let's put some things on the table. What would you do? Yeah.
I mean, this might just be my own personality, but if I have an excuse not to be at school, I am leaving instantly.
All right. This sounds like a great reason to get out of class early. Yeah. All right, so you're going to leave class, cutting to the heart of, in a non-disruptive way. Okay? Yeah, anybody else? Thanks.
Maybe, for me, if I feel like I have something miserable enough that I'd ask myself, would I want someone else to have what I have? Like, if it feels like my throat is sore, like I've swallowed a bunch of razors or something.
That's a nice image, Nate. Thank you.
Yeah, I might ask myself, do I want someone else to have what I have right now? And if it's no, then maybe I should step out of there.
Okay, so again, kind of leave the situation you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, I want to make reference to facilities that I cover in my shift.
Sure.
Some of them have isolation rooms that's specifically for cases like this, because the person might be so unwell that cannot take himself, and maybe will need a ride home and stuff like that. So not to get others infected within the facility.
Yeah.
So I think there will be need for an isolation.
So isolate from others. Yeah. Good. Yeah, you're on the right track here. So we have 6 steps, and that might sound like a lot, but I think when we break them down, they're pretty logical. So let's say you're at a ABC event, you're in class, you're in chapel, you're at field experience, if that's part of your ABC experience. You begin to feel unwell. What do you do? Well, step 1, inform the person in charge. Let someone know. So, and that's kind of against our instincts. We want to slip out quietly. Let the person in charge know so they know how to handle the situation. Okay? So that would be like your instructor or staff member. Let someone know. Okay? Because then they're going to have some things to do to respond appropriately. But so step number 1, let your instructor or staff member that's around know. Step number 2, isolate. Okay, so I don't feel very well, but I'm going to stay in class. The step 2 is remove yourself from class. Number 3, put on a mask. And remember, I recommended you just keep a mask in your pocket, because if you start to feel ill, it'd be a great time to take that precaution. Okay, put on a mask. Practice hand hygiene, sanitize. Okay, so if you are carrying germs, you're minimizing the risk of spreading those. Okay, step 1 was inform. Step 2 was isolate. Step 3, mask and hand sanitizer. Okay, hand sanitizer. Number 4, return home. Okay, go home. Let me just raise a bit of a wrinkle there. What if you took transit? What do you do? Man, That means going, waiting for the bus, riding a bus home with a bunch of people. What would you do?
See if there's someone who can give you a ride.
Yeah, which also seems a little counterintuitive. So, hey, I'm not well. Don't know what I got. Will you give me a ride? Sure. But actually, that is the right response. Is an ABC staff member will make sure that you get home safely. Okay, and we'll put on masks and we'll distance as much as possible in the vehicle, but we want you to avoid transit. So, that's the deal, is we're committed to getting you home safely so you can isolate. Okay, so don't be, again, inform your instructor or your staff member. Okay, so we can help you with that. Step 5, what do you do once you get home? Well, so you're at home, you're isolating. What do you do then? Yeah, recommend, do that online assessment tool, call 811, which is HealthLink. Okay, get tested. Okay, that would be our recommendation, especially with those core symptoms. If you have the secondary symptoms, HS is going to recommend it. They're not going to require it. Number 6, last step. Let us know. Let us know. So we have an online reporting form. It's available on our website. I've used it many times over the last year, actually. Hey, I'm not feeling well. I go on to our website, I fill out our online reporting form and say, here's what's going on. Now my coworkers know. They can support me. They can be aware of the situation as it develops. So I fill it out. Hey, I've got symptoms. I might fill it out a second time. Hey, I got a COVID test. It was negative. And it just lets everyone, keeps them in the loop where things are at. So when I show up to work the next day, everyone's not wondering what that was about. And it probably wouldn't be the next day I'd show up, but you know what I mean. Okay, it's open communication. And so this is what we would ask of you as well. You start developing symptoms. After you've gone home, you've booked a test, you've got the results, let us know what they are. Again, that's because there are still these recommendations around mandatory isolation. This will help you, right? I can't come to class because I'm not well. That's communicating with your instructor, for example. So keep us posted, please, on that. It's a really simple form that I'll get an email that you filled out that form. David Ford will get an email. Okay? So that's where that form goes. I want you to know. Okay? Questions about that process?
Are there consequences if all of these processes are not adhered to?
What are the consequences if I don't follow these steps? That's a great question. So we have something called our community rule of life. If you look around in the chapel here, you can see what our practices are as a community. And so you begin to see some trends here. Like the back one says sacrifice. It's a bit general, but what that one is getting at is I sacrifice my own freedom for the benefit of others. So, hey, I come to class even though I'm unwell, but guess what? I'm not really honoring the people in class that day. I'm putting them at risk. And so if we see you kind of doing that, we'll have a conversation. We have a process for that. And when our community rule of life is heading this direction and you're going that direction, we have a conversation. So I sign the rule of life. So if I come to campus sick, I will also have to have a conversation with my supervisors, like, you're not living out our community rule of life. So that's where I think it would go. It'd be a community rule of life conversation more than anything. Does that make sense? Yeah, good question. Any other questions about this process? And one last thing, and then I'll close just with a final comment. Even if you're not at ABC and you begin to feel sick, we recommend that you fill out our online reporting form so we know how to support you. We know what's going on in your life. So it's not just if you're on campus. So I got painful swallowing on my vacation this summer. It's great. This is a true story, by the way. I filled out a reporting form and I let the team know that Hey, I'm not feeling great. Hey, I got a negative COVID test. You know, habits, right? Keeping the community informed of how I'm doing. And so that's the spirit there. And of course, we want to be on the lookout for outbreaks, right? So we want to just be aware of what's going on in our community. I don't know about you, but March 2020 seems like a really long time ago. Let me close with this. It seems like a lifetime ago when this pandemic started. But there's been two things that have rooted me as constants here. You know, I remember we were first seeing news reports about people in Italy and emergency rooms overflowing and people having ventilators taken from them so they can be given to other people. And my wife and I are sitting in our living room. We're like, what in the world is happening and what's going to happen here? Do you remember feeling pretty unsettled at that time when we had no idea how this was going to go and how big it was going to get? And, you know, I just remember two things that gave me peace in that time and have continued to give me peace. Two things that rooted me. God's presence. I remember when Jesus, like the last thing he said before he ascended to heaven, he said, hey, I'm always with you. Last words are really important. Jesus said, I will always be with you. Even during this pandemic, God is with us. His presence is here. We are not alone, and that's rooted me in this time. Secondly, resurrection has rooted me. What is the Christian story? Is that death doesn't win. That we will all experience, just like Jesus experienced resurrection, we will too. And there's been a lot of fear propagated during the pandemic, and I think Christians of all people have this amazing belief system that says we don't need to fear death. Doesn't mean we want to die. Doesn't mean we're not going to be cautious. It means that no matter what happens, God is with us, and we will live again. And so I offer those two things to you to encourage you. Let's not be fearful as we move forward in this COVID world. There's a lot of uncertainty still, right? Let's not be fearful because God is with us and resurrection is a thing. Is that good news? Let's pray together and we'll close. God, none of us signed up for this. None of us said, hey, let's find out what it's like to live in a global pandemic. This has been something that is beyond our control and that has disrupted our lives in significant ways. Our personal lives, our professional lives, our academic lives. And God, we are aware that we have felt afraid, if we're honest. We've felt uncertain. We've been confused. We've not known how things are going to turn out. And that's made us feel pretty vulnerable. And we're tired about hearing about rules and regulations and restrictions. And yet in the midst of this, God, we want to cling to the good news of the Christian story, that you will never leave us or forsake us. And I think we can confess that that's been true in the last year and a half. That you've been with us through this difficult time. And we also cling to this belief that we will live forever in a resurrected state, that death does not have the final say in our lives. So regardless of the future of COVID and other threats to our bodily well-being, God, we're grateful that you will resurrect these human bodies and that we will live together with you and with one another in a redeemed creation with redeemed bodies. And so, God, we want to hear that repeated command in Scripture to do not be afraid. Help us to find ways to be engaged in the ABC community in a way that is wise, in a way, God, that is loving. And may we do it, most importantly, to the honor of your name and to the furtherment of your kingdom. For it's the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking in for that conversation. I know it's getting late, and I know it's a bit technical at times. This is going to be our reality as we live together, and so let's show grace to one another. And I'm looking forward to the year ahead. I'll see you on Zoom. I'll see you here on campus, and really look forward to a great year together. Okay? Thanks for being here. If you're coming to the Banff trip on Friday, we will see you Friday. We want to leave here at 8:30, so don't come at 8:30, come at 8:15. Got a bit of paperwork to do, and we'll get you situated in a carpooling group. And we want to be back at 4:30 that day. I hope to send out an email tomorrow just with some logistical details about that trip, so keep an eye on your email address, and can't wait to see you on Friday morning. And if you're not coming on the Banff trip, well, we'll see you. Class starts in the college program after Labor Day on the 7th, PACE program on the 14th. All right, so we'll see you around very soon. Thanks for being here tonight. Have a great trip home.